Hey guys, it's me, Angela, and I'm bringing you guys a brand new podcast, y'all. That is gonna be my tips and tricks with tackling the new history syllabus for both H1 and H2. But of course, this is with a greater focus for the Southeast Asian side of the H2 syllabus. So some personal information. I am a 2017 graduate, and I'm from the first batch of students that have done the 9752 history syllabus. So of course it's really hard as a pioneer batch to tackle a new syllabus because there's a lot of things that we don't know about the testing method of the new syllabus, the variation in content, and the kind of nuance or writing methods that the examiners from Cambridge will want. So yeah, so basically, I have compiled some of my personal tricks in the process. Some of my personal tricks that I have gained through the process of studying, the 9752 syllabus for 2 years, and I hope that is going to be helpful for you guys. Uh, yeah, so that's it, and we shall move on. Okay, so these things are pretty, personal in application. But I think it is also some things that you guys can learn a lot from. And I am not really going to go too specific into the content. Okay, so the first thing I'll be touching on is this note taking tips, which is that history is not a story but an argument. At least, to study the most effectively in our lessons, we should really not just sit in class and listen to history or listen to your teachers as if it's a storyline, as if it's narrative. It shouldn't be the case. Always be very focused in class and receive all those information and process it through your brain and try to make whatever points or information your teacher is telling you into a possible argument that can answer certain questions or certain essays, because at the end of the day you are not coming to lessons to really know like the linear progression of history from, like, I don't know, the 1950s to like the early 2000s, but rather to write an essay that can be used to answer a very direct and specific question. Okay, so certain ways that you can take note to streamline your note taking is that you always listen to possible theses or points that your teachers are making. So I know this sounds very like elusive, like what exactly is she trying to say? But the thing is, your teachers always sometimes let go away of really big points that you can really capture on and use for your essay writing. So I have one specific information where it showcases how you can actually process what your teacher says and make it or turn it into something that you can put on paper. And for example, so Mr. Koh, when he's going to go through the Southeast Asia economy content, he might be saying something, okay, something like this, which is in regards to the context of Southeast Asia history, which is that Southeast Asia post decolonization was very starved of natural resources and very underdeveloped in the private sector. You know, oftentimes due to long history of the Japanese occupation, long history of colonial rule, which is very how do you say, it's very like exhaustive for the resources that Southeast Asia had. And so, based on this kind of turbulent history, Southeast Asia's context when it comes to their economy is that they really lack a lot of economic fundamentals. And so now that Mr. Koh might have said such a context or might have provided such an insight into that period of history for you, you have to start thinking, hey, if Southeast Asia as a country itself, as a state, is so underdeveloped, and they don't really have a strong private sector, meaning they don't really have strong business, entrepreneurship is weak, then you got to think, in comparison between the private and the public sector, this make the role of the state, so the role of the government, even more important or of a greater impact, because they are the only ones in comparison to people like the private people from the private sector, people such as the immigrant population. Um, uh, so yeah, in comparison to those people, it made the government take on an even more important role because they are the only ones with the resources that is able to mobilize or jumpstart the economy. And so this is actually a very, very good point that you can bring in whenever the question is asking you to compare between the roles or the importance of the government in building up Southeast Asian economy, which is a question that you have to tackle when you go into the economic part of historical studies. Okay, so this is one thing. So always process the context or the content that your teachers are talking about, and think how you can make this into a specific point to answer questions. Okay, and then another good thing, like I said, is that you always have to ask or reference essay questions. So if you have a problem with the content, or if you're listening to whatever content or case study your teacher's telling you, you must always remember whatever information you get right now has to be used in your examinations to answer a very, very, very specific essay question. So you are not rewriting history. Okay, this is very important. You're not rewriting history. So how detailed your content is not going to matter. The only way that is going to matter is you are going to remember that specific content and use that content to answer an even more specific question. And how do you explain the linkages between evidence and point, which is basically your explanation. So a good way to actually stay on track uh, during the later half of the year, after June and all that stuff, when you're starting to get into A level and prelim modes, is that you always try to come to lecture with a set of prepared questions. Now you actually don't really have to like rack your brain and craft questions. You can actually gather a lot of questions from past year papers. You can gather questions from specimen paper, get it from your seniors, or even better, your teachers, and Shane and both Mr. Low are going to give you guys many, many different types of questions from different JCs or questions that they have come up with themselves, and always look through these questions and try to link whatever content you're learning to answering this question. This is extremely good because it helps you to um, always practice how you link evidence to your points, or how you use evidence to answer your question, which basically is how you score for history. Yeah. Okay. Now, another point to take note of when you're in class is that whatever the teacher says, or when you go back home and revise your notes, right, always note the points of similarities between case studies. So, case studies are what you learn from um, each countries, right? So for Southeast Asia, you're learning countries like Burma, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, and they have their own case. So they are case studies, basically. And what you have to note is that there are many, many points of similarities between the countries. Okay, so certain similarities that you can see is similarities between the policies that each country use, and so notice this in class and group these case studies together. Because I think a lot of students, when they study history like one country by one country by one country. It is good, but it's not effective enough. One good way to study it effectively is to study the similarities between all the countries, or similarities between most of the countries, so that you know when you use the evidence, you know that this can be applied to most or at least majority of the countries. Okay, I hope you guys get what I mean. So other similarities can also include similarity between the extent of use of certain policies or certain methods of governance. Yeah, and then also similarities between their timelines. How long were their periods of decolonization? How long were their democratic rules? How long did each of their leaders reign? How long did their democracy survive? How long were their economic policies implemented for? And many other things. And also similarities between the political, economic, and social conditions of the country. This is very important because context is very valuable in helping you know how each country's history progresses. So take note of, for example, what are the similarities between the political, economic, and social conditions of post-independent Singapore, Malaysia, Burma, and Indonesia? What are also the differences between them? Why is it so important to sieve out the similarities? Is that when you answer questions, most of the time you have the group case studies together and not break them up. So similarities is way more important than differences because they can help you form a very strong and solid package of evidence. So the thing is that take note of overlapping content because when you are answering your questions, you are grouping case studies together, not focusing on individual case studies. And once you can group similarities between the case studies together, you have a very strong package of evidence to convince your points. Okay, the next one is for those students who want to aim for L5 and L6 in essays. And this is gonna be very important. If you have any questions about this slide, please bring up to Shane also, because I think he will get what I'm trying to say here when I'm talking about the term nuance. So I think maybe you guys have heard him talk about what exactly is nuance. And nuance is basically small differences when it comes to commonalities. So it sounds very complicated, but let me give you an evidence that can, prove what I'm trying to say. So for example, you guys know that both Indonesia and Burma, okay, had experienced very chaotic and violent fight for independence. And then the other set of case studies, so notice how even in this, I'm grouping case studies together as a group. So never, never, ever look at case studies as individuals. Always look at them as a solid group. Unless the case study is very, very different. For example, Vietnam, when it comes to political structure, being a communist country is going to be vastly different from many other Southeast Asian countries. So that can be a anomaly or that can be a special case study used to distinctly point out the individuality of Vietnam as a case study. So we have both Indonesia and Burma, who had a very violent fight for independence, and Singapore and Malaysia, who had a peaceful and negotiated transition to independence. And all these are actually in relative. So, Singapore and Malaysia, in comparison to Indonesia and Burma, had a way more peaceful and negotiated peace. So nothing about this is in absolutes, okay? And then once you see the difference between their context for independence, then you got to ask yourself, so what exactly is the nuance when it comes to post-independent Southeast Asian nations? Is that how does the difference, okay, in their fight for independence or their context of independence lead to further variance in the outcomes of their respective histories? So one thing that Shane has often talked about is the fact that because of the difference in the context of their independence, one which is fought violently on blood and sweat, and one that is more peaceful and negotiated and a smooth transition from colonial masters to colonies, actually resulted in very different political structure in the coming years for many of their leaders. For example, in both Indonesia and Burma, violent fight for independence really gave huge prestige to the military, and this allowed the military to really gain not only prestige but also some form of political power, and it really affected how their democracy was going to survive through it all. So given that their independence was forged on military prowess, it really institutionalized some of the military's power basically, and of course this can really help damage or shape their democratic history. And if you guys know, both Indonesia and Burma soon slip into a pretty militant state, especially for Burma. So if you want to go further into even more nuance, then compare Indonesia and Burma. Indonesia is more of like a civilian military government, and then Burma is way more militant than Indonesia. What caused this variance, and what's the context behind it? And then on the other hand, there's Singapore and Malaysia, who, because their independence was peaceful and negotiated, right, their democracy might have survived longer or stronger because the military was not power hungry or was not a very powerful institution that kept fighting and fighting the pillars of democracy. So this is something that you guys can take note of, which is nuance. Small differences in a common context can really result in variance in how history is going to flow for these countries. Hope you guys can understand the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so now we're moving on to some of the more elaborate writing tips, and this is one of my guide to how I personally write an intro. It might seem a bit complicated, but I have a kind of sample paragraph that I wrote for one of the essays during Prelim 2, so you guys can check it out. Okay, basically my structure for introduction, is pretty personal, so please use as your own discretion, and this can be applied for most of the questions that I write about. So, yeah, I think having a structured introduction is very, very important. Like I said before, introduction really makes or break your essay. And every time when you pick out your pen to start tackling the question, you always have this kind of like fear that, oh, this essay is gonna be shit, alright? So what you can do is write a good introduction because it really builds your writing confidence and help you structure your entire essay really well. Okay, so what I do is that firstly, I will start off by giving one sentence that briefly summarizes the topic of the question. So the question can be about policies used during national unity. It can be about the success or failures of democracy. It can be about the policies that the government used during post-independent Southeast Asia economy. It can be about the AFC, the consequences of the AFC and the government's policies to deal with the Asian financial crisis. So this sentence can also be definitive. So any terms used in the question that you think should be defined can also be defined in the first sentence. Okay, the second sentence is that you have to point out the outcome of the effect of the topic. For example, point out the out. Oh yeah, okay. Sorry, let me just repeat myself again. Okay, so my second sentence is normally me pointing out the outcome or the effect of the topic. So, for example, if the question is about government policies, how detrimental were government policies to Southeast Asia economy, or was government policy detrimental to Southeast Asia economy? Now you know that the topic is government policy, right? And the effect is detrimental. So you gotta give a sentence or how to explain what do they mean by detrimental. So let's say government policies, okay, was detrimental in what way? What kind of impact did it cause, right? Did it completely reverse the trends of economic growth? Did it cause the economy to be very vulnerable to external influences? Did it depleted resources? Did government policy created many social inequity and worsened, income disparity, something like this. Now, outcome and effect is very, very, very important in the essay because it shows what is the impact of the topic, or what is the impact of what's the impact of the topic basically. And the impact is important because you want to show causality, right? The government did something and it caused something, so it's good to bring out. Okay. Okay, if this sounds a bit confusing, I have examples later. Okay, now the third point is you state your thesis. So what is exactly your general stand on the question? I think many people confuse what is the difference between thesis and point, which I can also elaborate more on during my sample paragraph. So thesis is basically a yes or no type of thing. I agree, I disagree with the general question. So that is kind of like your general consensus or general ATQ with the question. And then lastly, you elaborate on the specific points that you want to make. So I normally make 3, and I think 3 is a good number for any essay. And this introduction does not cover your balance. So basically, the 3 points are, let's say if you agree with the question, then the 3 points are like why. So you give why number 1, why number 2, and why number 3. Okay, and your points must also be explained to showcase the relevant outcomes or effect. And this is very important because a lot of people state their 3 points, but they never really elaborate. So if you don't really explain how your points tie to your thesis or ties to the question, you're not going to get a good introduction. Okay, now we can go on and see what I mean by that. Okay, the question is, the states themselves were more responsible than colonial legacy for causing the problems of ethnic separatism and racial discord. How far do you agree? Okay, so this question you can see is a bit more complex because they have a comparative kind of thing. They compare the states, which is basic government policies, versus colonial legacy, which is the context that the Southeast Asia nations had post-independence, right? And then they also talk about the impact. So now you see the impact, right? For causing the problems of ethnic separatism and racial discord. Now, this you will have. So why do I mean by you have to show the impact is because, let's say you say that I think colonial legacy had more of a hand in causing such problems. You got to explain what exactly is the negative impact of colonial legacy that can be tied to ethnic separatism and racial discord. You get what I mean? So whatever you do, you have to always talk about impact, both negative. Okay, for in this case, it's a negative impact, right? Because it created problems. It really helps you to answer the question, basically. Okay. Do I keep saying okay? Sorry. Alright, so this is the paragraph that I wrote. It's by no means the best introduction. It's just something I dug out. So, it's a format that you guys can learn from, but please don't copy the points or anything because it's, not the best. Okay, so I grouped the different statements in according to the points that I made here. Okay, so one sentence that briefly summarizes the topic of the question. Okay, is this: the colonial legacy left by Western colonies were that of badly defined borders. Okay, so you see, this is basically answering the question, right? What exactly is the colonial legacy? And that kind of stuff. Okay, second thing, point out the outcome or effect of the topic. So, what is the impact of colonial legacy? I said it causes them to raise fundamental problems of territorial integrity to Southeast Asian nations, and also causing the amalgamation of several distinct or even conflicting ethnic and racial groups. So this impact is basically explaining or linking to the question, right? Colonial legacy for causing the problems of ethnic separatism and racial discord. See how my introduction directly responds to the question asked. Now, secondly, however, so this is my thesis basically. However, I agree that the independent states were more responsible in the problems of ethnic ethnic separation and racial discord. So basically, I am answering or giving a general stand on the question, which is this. I say states in comparison to colonial legacy had a more hand in causing such problems. Okay, now this is my point. So I have to go on to elaborate my thesis, which is highlighted in green. As such, policies can escalate and widen the identity-driven tension among populations. So see how I explain what is the use of the state, or what is the purpose of the state, or what is the consequences of state policies that can further, drive disunity. So it can, for one, escalate and widen the identity-driven tension of the population. Okay. Secondly, clamp down policies might serve to increase the presence of violence, especially embedded in separatist groups. And then my third point is, lastly, the states themselves also had the opportunity to implement policies to increase equity so as to unify the population by economic means. Now, how do you make this essay real good? Is that you have to constantly interact the factors given. One factor is state policies. Another factor is colonial legacy. Now, to write a very good essay, you have to keep interacting state policies and colonial legacy and sieve out what makes one factor so much more important than the other. So you have to find out what is the relationship between government policies and colonial legacy. So what is their relationship? Relative importance can also mean which is of more importance or more impact. So was colonial legacy more long-lasting, or was government policy more long-lasting? Was colonial legacy greater in its impact, meaning it reached more groups of society or reached a greater, expanse, or was government policy reaching a greater expanse, reaching to every corners of society? These are certain comparative terms that you can use up, and this is really going to help you get a better score in your essays, because you have to interact the factors together to showcase a very balanced essay. This is also a very important point. So if you have any questions, please ask Mr. Koh about what it means by relative importance and causal relationships. Okay. Now the second thing is balance and counter. Your essay will not move beyond an L4 if you do not have a strong balance and a counter. So why you need a balance and a counter to every essay is because in order for you to prove your points are really strong, you have to showcase that your points are so strong, the oppositions also have nothing to say. You get what I mean? So list your good 3 points. For example, my 3 points is the ones highlighted in red. Now, my balance will be saying that, I think that sometimes colonial legacy can be more important than state policies themselves. Another thing is, now I'm moving on to study tips. Okay, so one study tip is that when you are going to study, please look at common questions. So my notes always have the couple front pages dedicated to questions. Okay, and what I do is that I group the questions based on common format. So I took all of the JC's Prelim 1 and Prelim 2 questions, and the special paper questions and RV's question, and I grouped them into different formats. And this will help you see what are the common predictions, or what is Cambridge method in asking question, so that if you know the format, you know firstly how you structure your essay, and secondly, what are the content that is most likely gonna be tested. Okay, so some of the question format that can come out, or topics that can come out, is that they will ask you about democracy's success or failure. It's always about that. The question can be anything about democracy, but it always linked to its success or its failures. The reason why, what's the reason behind it, and how it happened. It's always the why and the hows. the context for democracy's success or failures. So this is more got to do with, the decolonization process, colonial legacy, the dominant political culture in each country. This is so very important. And the context can also be used in explaining questions about, was the failure of democracy inevitable? Was it predicted? Was it something that was so surprising that it happened? It can be used to answer such questions. Now, the third kind can be about transition to authoritarianism. So these kind of questions happen a lot. It's basically trying to ask you how did democracy fail and how did authoritarianism rise? Is that kind of relative relationship, or does the failure of democracy lead to the rise of authoritarianism? So this is a big thing that you guys have to take note of. The fourth thing is tools of control versus democracy. So this is about what are the pillars of authoritarianism versus what are the pillars of democracy. So, for example, is the military better than, let's say, free and fair elections? Is the military better than, let's say, the parliament or the constitution? Or the electoral process, all these kind of things. So, these are basically what I like to call the uh, the pillars of concepts are basically what are the pillars of authoritarianism versus what are the pillars of democracy. Five is the degree of success with national unity, and this is the question that has come up several times. So they will either ask you to compare the degree of success of national unity between each country or the different case studies, or ask you to compare how successful was national unity as a whole, and any kind of stuff. Okay, another question type can be about policy versus policies. So this can be about both national unity or about Southeast Asia economy. So one thing can be, for national unity, can be about for example, what is it? Integrationist policy versus assimilationist policy. These kind of questions can ask you about that. 7 is comparative importance, which I have kind of pointed out a little bit here, okay, which is the fact that you have to compare X versus Y and their role in answering the question. So it can be about, was the government more important than external factors? Was the private sector more important than the government in blah 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 blah? Another question type can be about causation. It's basically a cause and effect. For example, this can apply to the AFC. Okay, what caused AFC? What is the consequences of the AFC? So this kind of question, or what caused the failure of democracy? These kind of questions are basically about what are the mechanics that led to such a disastrous or such a state. Okay. Now another thing that you guys can learn from my study method is that please memorize your content by points. So when you are answering this type of questions, when you're answering, let's say, democracy, success, or failure questions, right? Please memorize your case studies by the points they're going to make. So let's say if the question is, why did democracy? Okay. Maybe let's say, how successful? Sorry, let's try number 5. Okay, how successful was national unity? How successful were governments in achieving national unity in Southeast Asia? You can list out your points. So you can say governments were not successful in achieving national unity because of the presence of great separatist movements. And you gotta memorize your case study by points. So you memorize what are all the separatist movements that have happened, and what is the impact of these separatist movements? Does it hinder government policy? Does it cause great social disruption? Does it cause the government to lose out on its power? That kind of stuff. So, like I said, essay questions are very, very important because you have to craft your argument first, then memorize the evidence in accordance to the points. For example, one question is, was the failure of democracy inevitable? And you say, yes, the failure of democracy is inevitable, let's say because of the inherent diversity of Southeast Asia. So you memorize evidence. What are some of the diversity of Southeast Asia that make democracy impossible? Another thing is that memorize your case studies by groupings. So this is extremely important in Southeast Asia economy. So what you can do is, for example, let's say Southeast Asia economy, economic policies. Okay, why do I mean by memorize case study by groupings? Is please don't memorize the history of Thailand. Then you go on to memorize the history of Philippines. Then you go on to memorize the history of Indonesia, Burma, Singapore, and Malaysia. Don't do it on a case by case basis. Please do it on a point by point basis or group them together. So, for example, you want to, for example, during Southeast Asia economy, a common government policy is that the government will build up the industry, so industrial policies. Now, then you will have to, so basically you write down in your notebook industrial policies, and you look through your entire notes and find out all the industrial policies that Indonesia, Burma, Singapore, Malaysia have all done. Okay, and then you list them out. You list down the statistics. You list down the impact of each of these case studies. What happened to the industrial policies in Indonesia? What was its impact? Did it help the economy? Did it not help the economy? Did it fail? Did it achieve a limited success? And then you do the same for Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia, and Burma, and all those other countries. If this podcast has been really, really long, my voice is also dying. And I hope that previously whatever happened is helpful for you guys. I'm just going to give a pretty brief summary and, to help you guys stay woke, basically. So, yeah, like I said before, to score well in history, you have to take notes and ask questions. And when you, so what kind of questions you want to ask is that you want to keep making linkages between evidence to the points that you're going to make in future essays. So always remember, when you're studying, you're not just taking in all the content. You're also using this content to make a very, very solid point in the future. Okay, and that future most likely is going to be Cambridge question during the A levels. Now, second thing is, please study smart. Do not read history like you are reading a textbook or a storybook. Okay, I know that the details are interesting, but remember that you are writing an essay, and evidence is used from different countries, and they have to come as a package. So please do not read case studies like individual stories. Okay, and then you also have to really make notes on how one information from one country is going to correlate to the situation or the information in another country. Okay, so like I said, the similarities. Okay, and yeah, okay. The third thing is context is very important. Context is extremely important if you want to score well and get the L5. So please ponder about the similarities in the context of the various countries. For example, the nature of the decolonization, the nature of their independence, the nature of their governance and their leadership. Okay, what are what are all these impact on their political, social, and economic spheres? So, like I said, everything when you study is looking at the context, then looking at the situation or the content, and then you have to link it to the impact. So, what is the point of these policies or this context? That's very important. Okay. And then most importantly, when you're writing an essay, please ask yourself why. Please ask yourself why. Okay, and this will really help you explain your essay well. So yeah, when you look at a question, really start thinking about what kind of evidence they can use. Your points are oftentimes going to come from your head, but the evidence can make or break you, because if you have points but you don't really have good evidence to support it, then that is going to be a lousy essay. So after you come up with your evidence, keep thinking, why does your evidence support your point or your thesis? Okay, and that is basically your explanation. Why does your evidence support your point? Okay, and then the fifth point that I want to make is that please write well. If you guys are literature students, or you guys score well for GP, or you have a flair for writing, or you're just generally good at writing essays and have very clear and concise language, please use it. Writing history is not a mad rush to beat time. Writing history is not a mad rush to speed up every evidence that you know from the stuff that you have learned. So writing well can really boost your essay, especially in front of Cambridge, because you are pitted against students from AC and I who have years of astounding English usage and knowledge. So if you have good language ability, or you know how to write sophisticatedly, how to write clean, well and concise, uh, and have very strong vocabulary, use it to your advantage. Okay. Also, the thesaurus is going to be a very good tool for you guys. So please research on better and well suited vocabulary to use when you're crafting your thesis. Because I noticed that a lot of students have pretty weak vocabulary and therefore answer the questions in a very general kind of meh way. Do not answer your questions with general points. Answer it very specific and directed points. And to do that, you have to write with extremely sharp vocabulary. Okay. Yeah, so this also tied to the point about never give a general sweeping statement in an introduction. History is about directness. It is about specific it's about specificness. Okay, you have to be direct. You have to be you have to shoot right at the point. You got me? And it's not about showing out a paragraph. It is that you have to be very direct and specific in the answering of a question. Okay, and then last couple of points is that, okay, always rewrite and reread your notes. What I mean is that the teachers are going to give you a bunch of notes, and when you receive those notes, please don't just look at them and just absorb them like a sponge, and then that's it. No, take your teacher's notes, take Shane's notes, read through them, and then sieve out the very, very important details, sieve out the statistics, sieve out the tiny evidence that you can use for your essay, because not everything he writes can go into an essay. So please read your teacher's notes and don't just take it blankly. Rewrite your teacher's notes into very specific and concise points that will really help you in memorizing stuff. And also do use those note-taking or studying methods that I've taught you in front to help you really format your notes well, so that when you have to refer to something, you have all your evidence there, all the case studies there. You don't have to go flip through, your Indonesia case study and then look through the different years or the different leaders and, finding a specific point that you want to use. Okay, and if all else fail, I have 2 golden rules that you guys can use that really help a lot of students. Okay, no matter you are high ability students or you're inherently weaker at writing history, these 2 things are really, really going to help you. Okay, one thing is, if you don't have a distinctive style, please read your friend's essay. Read good essays. Read Mr. Koh's essay. Read Mr. Lowe's essay. Please read all good essays. And I don't just mean read the essay and forget about it. And clap for your friends and be like, oh my god, they're so good, I can never achieve that. Don't just do that. Read the essay and dissect the essay. Highlight the evidence that they use, because these can really help just streamline your studying. Because they use this kind of evidence, and this evidence are really good and approved by the teachers who gave them, maybe a good mark. You don't really have to go and remember any more additional evidence. What you got me? You can just use those that your friends might have stated or used. That's a good thing. But of course, please study more than what your friends does. Don't copy their work, basically. And also read for their explanation. Read for the points. What kind of points do they make? How are their points different from yours? That is also something you can take note. How do they explain their points? These are very good things. So please read and, even more importantly, dissect their essays. How do they write their essays? That's something that you have to learn. And the more you read, the more you will start to get to know what exactly is essay writing. And it really helps with your language, it helps with your point making, your thesis crafting. Okay, and then the last point is that this will help all students is practice. Once prelim 1 ends, I think it's a good time to really start writing legit essays on the time in the time condition. So what I mean by writing essay is keep away your notes. Keep away your notes, keep away your textbooks, keep away, your sample essays, and see a question and just write it. Because the only way your brain is going to memorize content, the only way your brain is going to sharpen in both writing and memorization skills is when you practice. Thank you guys. I will see you next time. Or yeah, whatever. Okay, bye bye.